Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer, sitting with Philip Daniel Miles today. Thank you for the invitation, Philip. We're going to be talking about the Venus Capricorn star, which is the morning star coming up on the 8th of January. And we're just going to unpack a little bit about it's the Venus retrograde cycle, basically. So, hey, Philip, how are you doing?
I'm grand. Thank you very much, Anastasia, for being within your integrity. You live into your word. You promised me this interaction and you're showing up. And that's all we need to do, isn't it? Show up.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And that actually connects to commitment, doesn't it? You know, when you make a commitment, which is Saturn, right? Which is the Venus Capricorn star. So there's a lot to say about this Venus retrograde cycle. And yeah, commitment, showing up, as you said, you know, being responsible for what you're putting out there, what you're intending, you know, what your purposes are, what you wish to manifest, what you wish to create. Been thinking a lot about this Venus star point from the point of view of the ruler being Saturn. And this has come up really strongly in my mind, probably the last week or so, probably even longer, but the last few days a lot stronger. Thinking about Saturn in medieval traditional astrology, Saturn ruled the magi, the magicians, right, which are the astrologers. And so it got me thinking about Saturn having this almost, we could say, two sides to it, right? And I'm not talking about the shadow side. Every archetype and planet has a shadow side. I'm not even talking about that. Just talking about accessing the frequency of Saturn from its highest potential, from its level of true wisdom, right? Which comes from experience, maturity, development, and things like that. Even when you look at Saturn taken under infrared lighting, which I saw a picture of this the other day, the colors of Saturn under that light have these magenta purple colors, like really beautiful colors, completely different to the way we normally perceive Saturn, the pictures of Saturn, which is those earthy tones, dark brown, dark orange sort of colors. And it just got me thinking, you know, Saturn is the ultimate teacher, really, in so many ways. I mean, Saturn cops such a bashing because it is a very, very difficult planet. It is a very difficult energy. You know, it rules this consensus 3D world, right? So, the point to that is that if we are working with Saturn in a non-integrated way, which would be to say that we live our life based on the conditions and structures that are presented to us and the conditions and imprints that we take on during birth and pre-birth from other lifetimes, that means that we are projecting the world of Saturn outside of ourselves, right? So that also brings in the matter of the issue of responsibility and freedom, and that in fact, to be free, to be totally sovereign and free, you've got to be totally responsible. And that's Saturn. So true sovereignty actually does really derive from Saturn's teachings as well and Saturn's experiences. So I was just thinking a lot about this in old traditional sort of texts and things like that. And I pulled out all my old, you know, Ptolemy books and things like that in the last few days, and just going back into the traditional teachings, because this Venus star point in Capricorn has a lot to teach us. First of all, Venus in Capricorn, she went into Capricorn back in November, right? And by the time she gets out of Capricorn, it's 3rd of March. It's almost 5 months, you know. And there's another time, you know, sort of signature coming in again. So she's spending a lot of time, you know, in the sign of Capricorn. So anyway, there's lots of things to unpack. Is there anything that you want to kind of offer or suggest or say before I bring up some charts and things like that?
Well, on your reflections on Saturn, I love what you share there because it's really about, as we say, showing up, doing our due diligence, and taking responsibility. And when we do this, we are actually not beneath anybody or anything. However, it's that sense of self-authority which comes with like sticking to our word and being able to gain the longevity that which we seek. Because if we are a bit like whimsical, or we don't fully embrace what we say we're going to do, then that's when we find that our structures won't support us. These things will be, as you say, a lower vibrational entity, more based on not having lived up to the standards of what was being asked for from an outside external authority. But when we take the dignified nature of being our own author and then show up for that, everything else will fall short, and we will be very successful in our manifestations. When we become Saturnian, we set the scene, which will be something that's not been seen before. It's like turning it into the more Uranian expression of Saturn, if you will, because it's exceeding our own boundaries. We can manifest very, very quantum developments which leave a legacy beyond our time.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point, and especially the point about your own authority, and that's what Saturn integrated is. When you have integrated Saturn, and we don't do it overnight, we don't do it in a month. Sometimes we don't do it in 10 lifetimes. It's it's an evolutionary process, right? But once we have really begun consciously integrating that Saturn, and in other words, we become our own authority, then there's no reason for any authority from out there to appear to us in a way that brings up our own sort of insecurities or fears or resistances, because there's nothing coming towards us. We've actually owned it inside ourselves. And the manifesting thing is an interesting one, because again, with that, it's a bit of a tricky subject, because, and I spoke about this recently, there's been this movement, if you like, for the last few decades, probably last couple of decades specifically, around the whole concept of manifestation positive thinking. And I think that's largely been incredibly misleading. Certain well-known famous people have offered that in a way where they've sold courses and workshops and books and things like that, suggesting to people, if you imagine a $20 million check in your letterbox for 30 days, well, on the 31st day, you'll get it if there's 31 days in the month. Just things like that. And I think that that's very, that very popular commercialized level of manifestation. Manifestation is not that. It really isn't. In fact, it's got very little to do with the material world. The manifestation is something that comes from a much deeper place inside us, and the external reflection of that will just naturally, organically come in the time, Saturn, that it's supposed to, relative to the alignment and desires of your soul, right? So, we have this part of our ego and personality, which is totally normal, of wanting things when we want them, wanting things instantly, wanting things quickly. And this is one of the most beautiful lessons of Saturn in its healthiest expression, and the Venus Star Point in Capricorn. It's actually asking us to slow down and have patience, right? And that's a very difficult thing for a lot of people. Admittedly, it's been difficult for me through my life because I'm an Aries. Aries just wants it yesterday, right? So that's been a pretty important lesson for me, and something I've been really reflecting on with this Venus Star Point in Capricorn, because so it's at 18 degrees of Capricorn for those that don't know.
Can I say, before you get into this interesting bit that you were about to get into, like just with regards to wanting it yesterday and being Saturnian and manifestation, this is something which I read a book which was, I can't remember what it was called actually. I think it was called The 10 Standards or something like this. Basically, if we don't aspire to a goal which is far off, I mean, we are the goal. Goal was my first ever word. And my dad was a huge soccer fan, football fan, right?
Oh, really?
Yes.
Awesome.
But regardless, if we set a goal off at the like far off thing, we may not have always achieved it when we go to bed. So what we can do is set standards for our day-to-day life. Like it might be just to do 30 press-ups or something like that, or to release a YouTube video every day. These are standards which I aspire to attain most days. Maybe it might be learning a language, spending 10 minutes doing that. Whatever it is, if we just have 5 standards that we can meet easily, we can say that we've ticked all our boxes and feel that we're accomplished. And then eventually that does lead to tremendous manifestation. And so I found that's particularly interesting. And also, one other thing before you go into all these interesting bits, one other thing I've noticed is that we've had Saturn square Uranus, Uranus being a modern day ruler of Saturn's second sign. Most of this year being pretty much done, 2021, and it will still kind of square it at some point towards September, August time in 2022. But this is the closing square, 33 years into a cycle that started very near to the galactic center at 28 degrees of Sagittarius in 1988. And so what I recognize that pattern being about, this cycle being about, is letting go of many patriarchal worldwide belief systems and separations, whether it's a class separation, it could be a gender, could be somebody's agenda, or it might just be the national beliefs or language divisions. Obviously, there's a whole load of new divisions and separating belief systems that have been added to the paradigm very recently. And so, in a sense, maybe the more divisions that are coming, with more divisions, you get more multiplications of compassion for the separation, as we recognize that maybe we're all a bit of a minority in one way, shape, or another. But yet, with all of these differences in the world, there are far more unifying similarities which we do share and becoming more illuminatingly obvious. And so I feel that this closing square between Saturn and Uranus over the course of the next 11 years, we're going to be developing the opportunity to hold a space of recognition for what we do share in common and in similarity to one another, rather than having oppositions that mean that we must have conflict. We can have an opposition and be okay about it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And furthermore, that
so that's virtuous. That's very, very virtuous, like very Venetian kind of thing.
Yes, it is. And what actually connects to that 100% is the Scorpio Venus Star Point, which has been in play for the last around about 100 years, transitions into Libra this 2022. That's a huge collective shift on the pentagram of the Venus clock as it turns, right? So each Venus star point spends around about 100 years in one sign. So we've had,
they meet. The Sun and Venus meet like in Libra this year, right? 29. It's not a Venus retrograde, but that's what you mean. Their meeting point. And so this is so interesting how it happens on the 5, because I've been watching it very recently as I've become like a full-time astrologer over the course of the past 5 years. I'm watching this Venus retrograde in Scorpio sliver backwards, this star point sliver backwards into Libra. I'm a natal Venus in Scorpio, but I'm a Libra ascendant Libra. So it's a very interesting thing to be able to observe.
Absolutely. And that's exactly right. The Venus star points move backwards in the zodiac, just like the moon's nodes move backwards in the zodiac. They move very, very slowly, so every 8 years, for instance, the degree of the Venus star point will change just 1 degree in 8 years, right? So it's a very slow moving clock. It's a universal clock. The way I like to sort of think about it is you think about the tropical zodiac, right? The 12 zodiac signs that we work, you and myself at least work with, right? Then you've got the constellations, which are the fixed stars, which corresponds to the sidereal zodiac. And behind that, that's where you've got the Venus star clock, the pentagram that's clicking away ever so slowly. One revolution of the whole 5 Venus star points is 1,200 years, 1,250 years, right? So it's a very long cycle. And then even behind that, you've got, from an esoteric perspective, esoteric astrology, then you've got the 7 rays, behind all of that. So there's these layers of frequency, of wisdom, if you like, that each filter through and speak through our human experience, and certainly our soul's evolutionary experience. Yeah. So
it's interesting that with Venus and the 5 and the Phi being a golden ratio, and
Yeah.
being pure beauty,
Mm,
because it's so enticing, magnetic. It's like a portal. It sucks you right in. It's like,
mm.
wow, I've just completely lost myself to the moment here, kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
this is why time is so entrenching, if you will. It's like the Maya, or like the dream world, which is also funny to bring us back to Capricorn.
Mm,
The skin is the derma, and that is really our boundary, and it is the dream, our ionosphere, our all-encompassing illusions.
mm,
That's
mm.
our boundaries which we can break. We might think, oh, the world's only as far as I can see, but then we go into a genius flash of awareness and we can see beyond even that limit.
Yeah, which is Saturn, right? The boundaries, as you know. And Saturn is the, well, we now know that we can see Uranus with the naked eye. Certainly not frequently, but sometimes that can happen. But for, for all of time, as it were, we've always been able to see Saturn with the naked eye, right? And anything beyond that, we couldn't see with the naked eye, right? And so that represents the consciousness and construct of Saturn's reality, as it were, right? And so the limitations and bounds in our consciousness until we actually work through Chiron, which is the next body, right? Which holds that rainbow bridge, as it's called. And by working through our chironic wounds, that's how we actually enter the field of Uranus. We can't get to Uranus unless we work through our own deep inner shadow wounds, pains, all that sort of stuff. And of course, when we do, we become the true, beautiful Chiron mentor and healer. But that means facing the fear of rejection, because Chiron was rejected at birth by both of his parents, right? So wherever Chiron is, one of the things that is hardly ever spoken about, typically what you hear about Chiron is the wounded healer. It's, yeah, where you might have some wounds, where you've got to do some healing. But the most important point about Chiron, before you go into any of the wounds and the healing and the yada, 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 you've got to recognize that where Chiron sits is your placement of fear of rejection. And it's by working through that fear of rejection, which will actually mean experiencing the rejection. You can't bypass it. You can't bypass Chiron to get to Uranus. We just can't do it from a point of view of evolution and consciousness, right? So I don't know how we got to that point, but anyway. Oh, you were talking
But
about Saturn, Uranus. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I love, like, it's like we have, it's like an unbelievable chord because you can't see it, and we are taught by Saturn. It's the teacher. And so everything that we lend our pupil to becomes our greatest teacher, or we are taught by. But if we listen to that word taught, it's not just about, oh, learning a lesson here. It's about tension. Taut string is tight. And so if we are, all of these things in the physical world of the matter, if we buy into them as the be all end all and that is all, then we're going to feel a little bit restricted, a little bit of tension. But when we can just loosen up and know that it isn't always so serious, and that we're exactly where we're meant to be, and that we are doing our best, we're doing our due diligence, I think this is when we surrender to the strength within vulnerability, to the strength within our wounding, to the strength to go beyond what might be a tradition or set standard that may not even be for us. And so this is the transcendence and the turning into our own farthest example of what love can be for ourselves as we support ourselves. That's the only way we can possibly support anybody else. It starts always with the self.
100%. And that's what the Venus star points talk about. It's the deepest frequency of love. And it's not the idea of romantic love, by the way. Not that that's not important or that's not an aspect of Venus. Of course it is. But Venus, and I credit a lot of the terminology that I'm using and a lot of the ideas to Ariel Gutman. She's the pioneer of the Venus star point work. She really is. A lot of people had written about, Venus star points previously relative to the pentagram and, the Fibonacci, etc., etc. But she really is the pioneer of putting, putting all the work together, the research, and producing this book, right, which I always like to show and encourage people to invest in if they're really interested in working with the Venus Star Point. Venus is the cosmic heartbeat, the cosmic heartbeat, right? She's very similar to Pluto in a lot of ways, as odd as that may sound, right? The volume of her richness is so deep, the cosmic heartbeat that she emanates and vibrates, that frequency, like you said before, the magnetic principle. She's the attractor. She attracts what she desires, you know.
So with this likeness to Pluto, you could even suggest that this era of transcendence happens through Venus, and maybe in more older, more ancient pantheons, we wouldn't have had, like, in a sense, Pluto, Lord of the Underworld. It would have been like, it's this energy of love which drags us down to the underworld, to our own underworld so frequently. It's part of this transition phase and initiation into a deeper, richer form of appreciation for ourselves, and then with one another also.
It is, and I guess the greatest example of that, and to add another level, is the myth of Persephone, right? And so here she is, walking around in the field, smelling flowers and, just kind of enjoying the moment, as it were, feeling like, I'm safe, everything's fine. And there comes Pluto out of nowhere and just, nabs her and just basically dives into the underworld with her. And that is simply a metaphor for the experiences we have in life that take us into what initially feels like the most uncomfortable and frightening and scary kind of world to enter, whether that's through the loss of love, as in a loved one, whether that's through just a very deep, intense, emotional journey of, having to have to face our own inner, deepest fears. Pluto in Scorpio always takes us into the domain of what we fear the most. That's what Pluto did to Persephone. But the interest, and that story, we could talk about that for hours, but the interesting thing is that when she was there, because she became the queen of the underworld, right? And
That's my favorite bit, right?
Yeah.
She kicks Hades out of his own throne and sits in it like Lord Muck, if you will. Like, this is my throne.
Yeah.
And so that is the star point, isn't it? Because the sun, the solar Helios, is the heart, is the throne. So that part is like the middle of the Venus retrograde, and this is the point of complete elimination of inferiority, elimination of being less than anything. That's the moment of empowerment and the end of the old cycle and the beginning of this new phase, right?
Yeah, it is. And I think it's also, I guess it's, for me, I would identify it as not so much about bringing in matters of inferiority and superiority or even gender, but really about Persephone going into the underworld it's many things, but one thing it is the journey and insight and understanding into the power of our own soul, really, right? And so, and that has nothing to do with being above or below or better or not better. That's all.
But the reason I said that was because to our fears, we feel less than. To our fears, we feel inferior. And so we feel tiny compared to them until we get to I'm sitting in the throne of the hellacious realm of my own underworld. And now there's nothing to be scared of, not even the darkness.
100%. And when that hit home for me, when my dad left this world, because my entire life, I had so much fear about my dad not being in this world. For some reason, I just had this really profound fear since I was like about 2 years old. I used to hold on to his leg and not let him go anywhere without me. I was so attached to my dad. And so when he left this world, which was 4 years ago, I literally, for the first 6 months, all I could see was black in front of me, literally. wherever I was walking, I was literally in that Pluto world, like literally with my eyes. Everywhere I went, everybody I looked at, everything I could see, it's like I couldn't even see the sun. I'm not exaggerating. It's the weirdest thing. It's so difficult to describe. But that was the journey of going into those, the deepest fears that I had, where I had to die myself, as it were. I had to die to that fear. That was the only way I was going to transform through that. And that was the most powerful and pivotal experience in my life from a Pluto level. And living that, not just reading about it, not just understanding that Pluto rules the underworld and our shadow stuff and blah, blah, but actually embodying that journey in the deepest way that words would never really describe what that was, but just as an example anyway. Yeah.
It's a fine example because it's once in a lifetime experience. And I love the words. I enjoy the wordplay. So when we look at die, often we're just thinking about DIE, but we can also see that we, like us hippies, if you will. Not that I always consider myself a hippie, sometimes more punk rock. But the hippies wear the tie dye, right? And so DYE is a bit like, you know, when you turn that TV off in the old days, it would go and it will flood the screen with black. And so it's a bit like when we dye the whole world a different color because we dye to the illusion of that which was all immersing. That's the transcendence. That's what I hear from you from that experience. In a sense, the loss is a great sense of empowerment, but it takes a process of coming into that term, coming into that story.
Yeah, it's taken me 4 years and I'm still processing and working through things. It takes a long time. The large scope of intensity was the first 2 years. And then after that, it sort of changed into a different process, if you like. And now I'm at a different stage with it again. But, you know, even up to 3 years ago, I couldn't sit here and even talk about it in the way I am without, you know, the most intense surge of emotion and anxiety actually coming right through my whole body, and just feeling like a sea of emotions just overtaking me. Now I can talk about little bits and pieces with, I don't know, with a sense of comfort, if you like, if that's the right word. Yeah. So, but see, this experience also corresponds to the Venus Star Point, right? Because the Venus Star Point can also reflect, you know, the loss of a loved one. You know, when the Venus Star Point activates certain things in your chart through that 8-year cycle or through the midpoint every 4 years, that can actually activate a person's death, you know. So
well, when I look at my personal ones with this Capricorn, it was 8 years ago, was 6 months after my friend committed suicide. I've only had 4 bereavements, and 8 years before that would have been just the winter after my father passed away as well. And so that's 16 years ago now. That's a long time. But like, I don't remember the 16 before that. I'm sure there's something prominent and poignant about that one also, as I'm a Capricorn sun and Venus is my chart ruler. But yeah, my granddad passed away at the end of 2019, and my grandmother passed away glad this year. So they went together-ish within a 2 years, just under. And so it's nice closure. And then we have the Venus retrograde to tie it in a bow in some ways, you know. But it's like there's other things that we experience as well. But I recognize those similarities in this part of Venus's overall cycle.
Yeah, so for the audience that's listening, just to be clear, this Venus Capricorn Star Point, it's actually a new cycle that's beginning, right? So a good thing to do is to go back. You can go back 4 years ago. That's the midpoint of when the cycle began 8 years ago. And I've found that it is worth looking at the midpoint every 4 years as well, because even though it's a different phase of Venus, it actually shows you things being activated and triggered at that time as well. Now, whilst this is a brand new cycle that's beginning, it does also mean, which this is the principle for anything that's coming to closure or an end or a beginning, exactly that. You can't separate the end from the beginning. They're both occupying the same space, right? When something ends, something else begins. So, yes, it is a brand new 8-year cycle, but what can also be occurring for some people is that because of the nature of how Venus has this dance with the sun and the earth, and she does this, as you know, she draws the flower, the rose, right? She's a symbol of the rose, she's a symbol of the flower, the pentagram, all of that. And when you see that,
Do you know, I love about this rose is that she's a very fair, very, very fair rose. It's a bit like we come here to awaken to ourselves, like the pharaohs, and it's like through the
yeah,
depths of loss that is actually that we truly awaken and to stand up for ourselves. Because again, like a stand up is a frequency of self-love that stands up for ourselves within our own authority. But if you're just laying down taking anything that's coming to you, that's not self-love. That's just being a beam of light. Beam of lights are horizontals, where stand-up frequencies are, excuse me, beams of light of the horizontal, that's this way, right? And vertical is sound, vibration, and frequency, like the pulse, like the heartbeat. That stands up, that's frequency. And so pharaohs, were they awakened through time, like in even time's an aromatic herb.
mm, mm,
THYME. Anyway, I'll pass this back. So that, I've got a question about, so the star point, like this is very important for my interest, because it must be around this time. Venus has gone retrograde, the sun's moving closer to it in the zodiac. But Venus is still visible just about in the night sky. It must be about to be gobbled up by the beams of the sun any day now. That's when it actually goes into the underworld. And as you say, this is like Persephone's story. Also, we hear it in the Bible, 40 days and 40 nights of Christ going into the cave.
yes,
But what cave is it? This in yoga, in the Vedic tradition, is Brahman. And this represents the pineal gland, or the deity sitting on a leaf, dreaming up the whole entire world. And so it's when we go within into Brahman's cave that we choose the opportunity to close down some of these stories. But this is just happening now at this stage now, even though we might have faced some things with the station retrograde. I know I personally noticed some alterations in the experience. And now it's about going within and seeing how maybe we can repackage or reframe or take responsibility so we can find the longevity that we may be seeking in whatever area of sky this is taking place for us.
definitely. So I just want to finish the comment on the spiral thing, because it's a really important point for viewers that aren't aware of this, because it's a brand new 8-year cycle that begins. One thing to understand is when you go back and look at what was happening 8 years ago or even 4 years ago, it could very well be that very significant chapters of your life come to a close now. That's obviously one huge possibility and very typical, in fact. But it can also be things that you gave birth to, say, for instance, 8 years ago, or for instance, even 4 years ago. And because of that spiral movement of Venus and that flower that she creates, so you could think about this 8-year cycle as you're spiraling up now to the next level, of whatever you've created. And it's kind of like the pillars that we create in our life, which is a very Saturn thing, right? It's the structures, that we create. And the structure and the reality that we create is an individual thing. There is one generalized consensus perspective of reality, but we all have our own kind of perspective on that as well, right? So you can think about it from the point of view of what am I sort of finishing up at the moment? What am I completing? That's probably been a huge portion of my own sort of personal development as well. And what am I actually taking with me now into my journey moving forward? So it's about recognizing the differences of that as well, and just everything we've learned, because as we've said before, Saturn is one of the greatest teachers, and it is always about how do we develop, how do we mature, and we develop and mature over time, over life experience, right? And because Venus, the Venus star point, she magnifies and puts a heartbeat into anything she touches. And so in this case, because the ruler is Saturn, and because she formed a conjunction to Pluto just as she went, stationary retrograde, then we're really looking at a Venus Capricorn star point with the presence of Pluto, and of course, Saturn being the ruler, and Saturn as well, in the sign of Aquarius. Even in 2022, obviously it's going to go retrograde for about 4 months of the year or something like that. So there's another indication again that we're not going to actually jump hoops and jump far ahead as we perhaps want to or think we might. This is a real lesson and process through the cosmic heartbeat, Venus, of the things that we really love, that we really enjoy, that we really appreciate, that really make our heart strings sing, right? From the level of really being very patient and taking the time with how we need to grow through this process. It's really about growth and time. Time is just one of the biggest things, because even though on the one hand, yes, time is an illusion, but on the other hand, it's also very, very real, given that we live in a third dimension reality. We can't evade time. We know now that it's the time that it is. We know that tomorrow morning is morning. We wake up. We have a biological clock. In the physical dimension, the concept and experience of time from a linear perspective is absolutely true. It's not an illusion. But the understanding that there is soul time, which is Pluto, and there are other dimensions of experiences going on, that's an important thing to integrate, to remember, to understand, as opposed to just working with the Saturn dimension of time. Like, I'm 30 years old, I'm going to be 31 next year, I should be doing this, I should have this, I should have that. That's the world of Saturn, and that's actually where we can get really stuck, and that's where we can get really limited as well, right? So we kind of have to we have to become our own authority, as we said at the very beginning. We have to respect time. Saturn is the lord of time, right? We have to respect the time that we have here and how we are utilizing that time. And this Venus Capricorn star point is a very important reminder of the respect of time, that we have here. Because in truth, we don't know how long we'll be here,
So just in maybe a more conversationally based, like for time in itself, like in respect of time, knowing that actually time breaks down when we do things that we enjoy. And it's about not wasting time, I suppose. It's not say don't rest when you need to rest. That's a good utilization of time. But it's about finding that when we have got the energy, which will probably be the vast amount of time if we when we were scheduling things that bring us into our infatuation, our enamorment, our self-worth and joy. This means not doing things we find crushing or too depleting. This means just finding that our habits and our rituals and our routines are the things that we can actually find are our greatest profit. We can find that they're fortuitous when we open up that kind of golden ratio by doing the activation of ourself. And this means if you wanted to cut hair because you enjoy cutting hair, if you want to do paintings, maybe it's carpentry, maybe you want to be an astrologer or already are. Whatever it is that you find brings you that sense of love or passion, this is the thing that's not going to be a waste of time. This is going to be a well-used application of self. This is what I have learned through having for many years done things that I didn't enjoy, through many years working for somebody else, doing something just to pay the bills. That really sent me depleted until I took myself away, the fortunate opportunity that I had to be able to work on my craft. Like as an astrologer, I went without a few things, and I stayed sleeping on my mother's floor for a couple of years. But eventually now I work in a foreign land, and it's worthwhile like taking these taking less money for a little while, doing something which wasn't a guaranteed paycheck, it pays off because we're banking on ourselves.
Mm. Yeah, and that's obviously a pathway that a lot of people won't take because it's outside of the consensus reality. In other words, it's outside of what feels secure and safe, right? It's a risk. And when you take risks in life and when you step into what's uncertain and unknown, that's when you're living through Uranus. When you're living with a sense of, I've got a paycheck, I've got a house, I've got this security, I've got these foundations. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that that's a consensus reality experience, right? And 80% of the population are living off that level. That's fine. But just to draw a distinction, when you step into, I like what Jeffrey Wolf Green says. He's written a whole book on it called, what's it called? I've just forgotten. But anyway, it's got the title in it of The Unknown, right? So when you step into the unknown, that's the world of Uranus. That's the world of what brings up a lot of insecurity, actually, But some people, absolutely thrive in that environment. They love it because the sense of liberation, authenticity, and freedom that comes through that is far more enriching than what perhaps what I like to call, at least, a false sense of security can provide. And the reason I call it false is because whenever we think we have everything under control, right, and we are so safe and secure, well, that's when Uranus is going to kick you up the butt, and possibly Pluto as well, and going to spin your whole world upside down, because nothing is safe and secure, nothing is permanent, and we can't control everything. We can't control, in fact, I don't think we can control very much.
Well,
So,
if someone's trying to control us, if some external body or group or anything is trying to control us, that's normally, I recognize they're coming from a position of having already lost control. And so if we're trying to control something, maybe that's something we can ponder on and reflect into. And then maybe we can gain a little bit more surrender, which is, in a sense, a blissful sense of not having to control, an observation, being via witness, if you will, and letting our eye be single. That's really coming into a newer potential, I feel. And obviously, maybe we bounce back into trying controlling something like, don't make my cup of tea too hot, or can you please turn up at 7 or 5 minutes before, because I just won't be able to manage after that. But if we could just surrender, like today in our arrangement, you're like, I'm just going to be half an hour. And I was like, I'm going to just be 5 minutes. And then we show up and it's great. I'm really enjoying our connection, because when surrender comes, the flow comes, the lucidity comes. And what's that? That's the solution.
yeah, fluidity, 100%. I don't think as I said, I don't think we can control really very much at all. And there are different scopes and levels and fields of the issue of control. But to surrender, it means you need to come from a place of trust, right? A place of
A good word.
yeah.
I like that trust. It's like accountability, it's love, it's credit, it's current.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's an inner standing and inner knowing that is not dependent on anything that is happening externally. It's just not dependent on that, and that's a true position of trust. And we could even use the word faith or belief, or inner knowing and inner standing, as I like to often say. And that is even like Eckhart Tolle says, and I recently said this in a previous video. One of the things he says is, and as simple as this is going to sound, it's incredibly wise and profound. He just says, I don't mind what happens. Yeah. I don't mind what happens. I mean, that is because he's an Aquarian, right? So that's the ultimate sort of beautiful expression of Aquarius, having that ability to be completely detached and objective, non-identifying. The minute we identify, that's when control comes in, because once we identify with something, we somehow like to either take ownership over it, right? It's mine, this is my experience or my idea or my this or my that. And that brings in the control, because you don't want anybody to take that away from you. You don't want it to be touched or whatever it is. And so you're trying to, hold it and keep it where you want it, which is control. But the minute you just, I don't mind what happens, don't mind what happens. How
It's a massive.
liberating could that be for us? I'm not saying I'm
But,
like that all the time, definitely not. But
no,
I
me.
like to
But
try
like
to be.
with the control, like it's carrying a massive weight on our shoulders, and that's the WEIGHT, weighty, heavy. But when we actually do, as we say, release, we're not waiting. Like WAIT, like when we're trying to control, we're waiting for someone to meet us where we want them to be, and we're wanting that something to be functional in the way that we saw it. However, when we surrender, we don't have to then wait for anything. We could just find our own contentment right here in the present. And so that releases the heaviness, it releases the oh, we're not happy because we're not where we're at yet, and we can just be.
Which is Pisces, the ultimate surrender.
Well, that's a practice, isn't it, I suppose?
It actually is. It's a very it's a daily practice. Yeah, it's literally a daily practice, and it's sort of trying to, and this is hard, and this is where meditation is incredibly useful and powerful. It's finding a way to kind of allow the mind and the ideas, which are just like clouds, they come and go. We have over 50,000 thoughts entering our mind every single day. Do we have control over those thoughts? No, we don't. But what we actually pay attention to, the thoughts that we hook into or identify with, that's where we have a level of control, just to use that word, because it is up to us what we choose to hold on to relative to what streams through our consciousness. But the practice is to allow whatever comes in, because it's going to come in and it's just going to leave anyway, right? And so it's in that moment of when it does come in, how am I connecting to that? How am I identifying to that? What's it bringing up in me? How could I just let it sort of come in and then just go, as it will actually. And that's where the power of meditation teaches you to be truly present, to truly surrender, and it's a funny thing, because when you practice that and you really feel it, you really embody that kind of experience, you can really laugh actually at life. You can just laugh at so many things. It's such a freeing experience.
I come up with this. I was listening last night and I heard this word from another angle again. Like when we're the witness, well, wit is humorous, isn't it? Like it's humoring ourselves to witness ourselves, because we're just like, oh, look at them, they're adorable. They're trying their best, aren't they? Ourselves, we do. So it is amusing.
That's a good one. I love the etymology of words and breaking them down and rearranging them. There's so much that gets revealed, that gets seen when you do that with words, because it's like, it's obviously you're not just sitting at the face or surface level of something. You're doing the Pluto Scorpio thing, right? You're breaking it down, you're zooming in, and you're getting a deeper expression and meaning to it, right? And perhaps even a more truthful one, I would say, as well.
It always blows my mind, for sure. I've got a couple of questions for you, if I may ask you.
Yeah.
So we're coming from the evening star,
Yep.
which is when Venus is visible just after the sun has left the local area. It's not like illuminating the sky anymore. Venus is the first star to appear. I actually just visited one of the most beautiful beaches I've ever been to, and for the second time I came to the same place in South Mexico last year, and I watched the Great Conjunction. That was amazing. This year you can still see Saturn and Jupiter. They're still there within the same eye shot, but they're far apart. But the fun thing is, Jupiter's been about 30 degrees away from where Venus is stationed. So Venus will always appear first, and then it's just like a pinprick in the sky. It's obviously beautiful. And then Jupiter, and then you wait another 10 minutes, Saturn's there in between them both. But this evening star is now finished. It's pretty much going to be on its last days now. And so I see this as more of the evening. the more Libra, evening out of the things that get initiated at the dawn of the day with Aries. So this is Libra o'clock when we look at the sunset and we go beyond the surface level things, and we can really have a depth of conscious awareness, which is very valuable. However, the dawn star, I say, is more like, well, what can we do with our day? How productive can I be? And I just wanted your reflections on these two different archetypes and what they mean, what they establish, what they signify, how we can utilize them.
Yeah. Look, the evening star and the morning star, definitely completely different, actually, completely different. How are they
It's a bit like the West, because this is the West, isn't it? And where the sun sets, where Venus is it's, I like to call it the Western star, whereas the dawn star, the morning star, is the East star. It's the Easter star. It's a reset, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It's the morning star was considered from back in the Mayan sort of cultures. She was seen as the warrior goddess. So when she went retrograde for that 40-day period, and then that's where the myth of Inanna is highly significant, right? When you understand the myth of Inanna, which is actually Venus, you realize that this 40-day retrograde cycle it literally is every time it happens, it's really an opportunity to really transform something about the world of Venus in our own heart, in our own consciousness, right? Which then corresponds to, yes, relationships, yes, love, all those different components. But as she goes through those different spheres, and she's got the evil sister, and and then she gets murdered, and then she gets saved, and she has to take off a different garment as she goes through every sphere, and she ends up naked, and the garments that she relinquishes are actually garments that gave her very special powers.
So astrologically, these garments, when this every time that we have the Venus meet the moon, or is it a full moon within each of these sections?
It does correspond to the moon's cycle with Venus as well, 100%. And the cycle of the moon and Venus actually speak to those different 7 layers, 7 centers or worlds, whatever you want to call it, which then basically what it's referring to is actually the 7 chakras in our body, the 7 traditional chakras. So, and each chakra has a different power point and, signature, etc. And they were represented in that myth by just different garments she was wearing, like she had a crown, and she had something there on the pineal gland, and she had something on her throat. And every time she had to relinquish something, she was actually relinquishing some kind of power of hers, as it were, right? But the moral and the point to the story is that it's very similar to Persephone in the underworld. You go into this other world where it feels like you are being it feels like everything's been taken away from you. And the reason I feel that it does get taken away as it appears is because the only way you can truly see your true power is to be, just to use that metaphor of being completely stripped off everything, because that's when you can see who you are, without all the stuff, all the layers of what you think you have, and where you might think you're powerful, or you're this or you're that, or whatever talents you've got, doesn't matter. So this stripping back takes you back to the absolute essence of your true power, right? And then you have this rebirth, and you are transformed and rebirthed into this beautiful Venus goddess, and you come back. But when she comes back through that journey, she comes back as quite a fierce goddess. That's why she was the morning star. She's identified as the warrior goddess. And the point you
So
made,
light bringer, isn't it? Like Lucifer as well, the light bringer, because it's like she signifies that the day's coming. Like
exactly. And her business is business on Earth now. So it's interesting, this is a Venus Capricorn star. Capricorn is it's an Earth sign ruled by Saturn, which, you know, rules this earth, right? This reality. And here she is as a morning star. So this is about getting to our business, you know, getting serious about our shit on earth, right? What are we doing with our time? Where are we investing value and love and energy and discipline and dedication? Where are we doing this? This is what she's actually taking us through in terms of the retrograde cycle, where we get to reflect on all of this, right? So yeah, warrior goddess is the morning star, connected to earthly matters, very strong emotional reactions to things, the morning star. I said this yesterday in my video. Morning star energy is like something happens to you, you have an instant emotional reaction, and then you think later. Evening star is the reverse. Something will happen, the evening star will reflect, think about what happened, and then have an emotional response or reaction to it. So they're very different from where they come from, because Venus is closest to the earth when she's retrograde, which is the morning star. She corresponds to the embodiment of the earth, right? The embodiment of our body. So we feel everything so much more, I suppose, visceral, so close to us, you know, because she's closest to the earth. That's why. So evening star corresponds to that cerebral, dream, you know, creating things from our right brain, consciousness, dreams. She's the celestial in Urania goddess as the evening star. Now, there's an asteroid called Urania. She was the goddess of astrology, basically. And so Venus as the evening star, that's what she reflects. She reflects that the mystical, the night, you know, the wisdom, the unknown, going into different sort of spheres of understanding, very cerebral. But the morning star, which is what we are in at the moment, is about what are we doing here with our life on this earth plane. It's very right here, right now, total embodiment. Yeah. Does that help explain that? Look, I just need to top up. So I'm going to pause. We'll be back. All right, so we're back. We just had to take a short break. Okay, so we were talking about some of the distinguished differences between the evening and the morning star. Now, perhaps I'll just...
It's in the twilight hours, isn't it? So it's in the twilight hours that we see this morning star. It's a bit like those hours where the dimethyltryptamine, the spirit molecules flowing. It's like Pisces o'clock just before dawn. And so they say that this is a very activating time. It's really where we're getting to crystallization of awareness. And so I love that. I hardly ever see the morning star because I'm a night owl, but I think it's always inspiring to see if I could get up and catch wind of it. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
Catch observation.
Definitely. I haven't really seen her, but I've seen amazing pictures that people have taken that, you know, just shared on social media and so forth. I mean, Venus is the brightest object in the sky other than the moon, you know, really. And the sun, of course. So yeah, she's absolutely glorious to witness. You know, it's always really amazing to play with the sky, you know, the night sky, to go out and observe these wandering stars, which are the planets, right? And try to familiarize ourselves with the map of the sky, you know, just as we are familiar of the geography of the earth. You know, there's this sort of celestial geography of the sky, isn't there? And, you know, when you're interested in astrology, I think that's a really important part of your growth as an astrologer as well, to go out there and look at the sky, to see how things are moving, you know, just to observe them. And also even from just an energetic perspective, you know, when Venus is rising or setting, you know, to do like a Venus meditation. Ariel Gutman talks about doing, you know, a mantra as the you know, the ventriloquial man, you know, the five-pointed star, which is what we are, right? And so standing there in that star point position and working with the energy of Venus, you know, coming through into like through the head region, if you like. And you follow, she's got it on her YouTube channel for those of you that might be interested. It's just like a 5-minute video, and she just walks you through working with the energy of the Venus star point through your body. It's literally a meditation that you do for a couple of minutes, and it just you embody that frequency of Venus. And I think that's a really good practice actually to do every day, really. Especially if you want to really bring more love, you know, or it's not that we're bringing more love, because love is there, but it's actually our resistance that we may have about it, right? Or fears that we may have around it, or where we may be blocked around that, because a lot of people's hearts are very blocked, you know, through pain, through grief, through betrayal, through whatever it may be. So we all have these sort of walls and blockages, and Venus enables us to break those chains and to become more embodied in the essence of love, which is essentially what we are. You know, in truth, we are just this beautiful infinite essence of love, you know, that comes from divine source creation to all things. And all these little journeys and lives that we take on, and the little roads and twists and turns and everything that goes on, is not anything but our own soul's choosing. Whatever happens, it's our own soul's choosing. That's a tough truth pill for a lot of people to swallow, because that then brings up a lot of questions, or anger, brings up a lot of different things. So if something really bad happens to a person, for instance, and you say to the person, well, in some way, from a soul perspective at least, your soul had a contract with that other soul to have that kind of experience, right? And I think when you can work with that sort of way of understanding life, which is right brain, well, first of all, it empowers you, because it stops the whole projection blame thing, and you start to understand more deeply why your soul has chosen to have whatever experience it may be. I mean, in truth, and this is my favorite saying as well, you know, every sinner, every saint has a past, and every sinner has a future, right? That's one of my most favorite sayings, and that just simply speaks to evolution, and furthermore, it just really describes and helps us understand that, you know, you might be a saint this lifetime, but next lifetime you're going to be a sinner. So this bullshit about, you know, that person's, you know, absolutely incredible and that person's absolutely shit, is just a duality. It's just a dual expression of, you know, our ego, personality, physical self. So in other words, there's no right or wrong in anything. And Venus can help us actually become more more embodied in the love frequency within our own heart center, and to emanate that and share that and give that. You know, Venus is about sharing, all about sharing, you know. So anyway, he's transiting Venus, obviously retrograde. She went retrograde on the 19th of December. She goes direct on the 30th of January. And so there's about, you know, 40 days or 40 nights, whichever way you want to frame that. She, you know, started with Pluto, so it's a double signature. You know, it's Venus retrograde. Venus retrograde is going into the underworld, and she lines up with Pluto. Pluto is a symbol of the underworld, so it's a double signature. This is a very intense morning star because of Pluto's presence. And by the way, the Venus retrograde in Capricorn conjunct Pluto last occurred in the 1700s, right? So that exact combination in that sign with Venus retrograde that only occurred back in the 1700s, right? The last time that happened. That was a very bleak time in the world, by the way. And not that I want to sort of focus on the bleakness of the external Saturn reality of what's going on at the moment, but it is there, it is happening. And when I was speaking with Ariel about this, we both agreed that, the Pluto of presence is looming in this Venus retrograde cycle, and it is going to bring up a lot of physical endings and deaths and things like that as well. It's just inevitable with Pluto there, so
What I think is interesting with this is that Venus is at this point in time, as we do this in the last day of the year or so, it's already had its two conjunctions with Pluto, and it will have a third one with, and the same day, Mars has this conjunction with Pluto, and the last time that Mars went into a conjunction with Pluto would have been 100 weeks prior to that, on around the 20th, 21st, 22nd of March, when the whole world went into the lockdown for the first time in 2020. Okay. And so that's the end of the cycle that began that day. But not only that, Mercury went into shadow yesterday and shall be going up to 10 degrees and then coming back to meet Pluto a second and a third time. So both Venus and Mercury meet with Pluto 3 times. It's a bit like Mercury is... Excuse me?
I said exactly. Yeah, I spoke about this yesterday. I did just a video on Mercury's cycle.
It's a bit like it's picking up the shoelaces, or it's like helping tell the story. It's like there's unfinished rethinking to be done, or reprocessing with the Mercury having to do this, but it's not going to meet with Venus again until later in the year in Virgo, much later in the year. So although they had a conjunction the moment that Mercury went into shadow, Mercury's going to come back, and it's going to help the process out. It's helping clear the way for when Venus and Mars come along at the beginning of March.
Definitely. Also, with that,
so this is the station date. You've well, I like this a lot as well, like the station, because of the it's happening at 11 degrees, which is where Venus was just the day before the Taurus eclipse, the full moon eclipse. And so that was in November. But at that point, Mars was at 10 degrees of Scorpio, and they traveled together because Venus was slowing down, normally more speedy than Mars. And they traveled together in a sextile for about 4 weeks. And so it's fun that Mars has now, at this point, joined Venus hardly moving, and Mars accompanies Venus by almost a conjunction, not until they get to 0 Aquarius, but it travels with, like a chaperone, or maybe it's a self-supportive kind of energy that's really coming into the strength of responding rather than reacting to situations. It depends how we want to frame it and how we experience it, I suppose. But I think it's very interesting that the sextile was there and now it's the conjunction.
Absolutely. And also these two trailing together, they're going to meet up in April, right, when Venus is in Pisces, and that Jupiter Neptune triple conjunction occurs with Venus, Jupiter, Neptune, all in Pisces, triple conjunction, which, by the way, last occurred 160 years ago, right? So that's going to, and Mars is going to be there as well in Pisces with them. So I'm going to come back and talk about that actually, so I won't really go into that too much now, but that's just further to add to what you were saying about this Mars-Venus thing is really, really, really significant, really activated on the Earth plane at the moment through these archetypes and through these patterns. Yeah, so, and also I just wanted to add that, and I mentioned this yesterday, Mercury going retrograde here in Capricorn, right? What actually happens is Mercury goes retrograde 4 times in 2022, right? The 4th time, it's actually back in Capricorn again, where it goes retrograde again in Capricorn, literally on the last day of 2022, right? So that's really super interesting, because whatever we do now with this Mercury retrograde cycle and Pluto, a lot of what we are sorting through and processing is going to be actually seen in a complete closure really at the end of 2022. Yeah, so that's pretty
I
interesting.
love that.
Mm,
That is very interesting. I had been noticing that Mercury retrogresses back from air to Earth, from air to Earth.
mm,
But that will be the beginning of just the Earth. Maybe that's very interesting. Hadn't looked that far.
yeah, yeah. I only looked at that yesterday, and I was pretty blown away. Actually, I was blown away by that because I thought this is not a, nothing is a coincidence anyway. But this is really telling us something about Mercury in Capricorn and that Pluto. Because Pluto, look at Pluto. It's at 27 degrees, right? It's so close, to finishing his journey, right, in Capricorn. Like, and he's working through all these other spheres, all these other planets, right? So he's putting so much into what needs to really be cleared out, right, from that Capricorn level. It's the patriarchal, 10,000 old year system, right? Pluto is just smashing through everything in so many ways, so many ways. I just want to say for your viewers and mine, whoever's listening and whoever is not aware, just very simple, when you're looking at the Venus star point, obviously, look at where 18 degrees of Capricorn is in your birth chart, because wherever that degree is, that cycle, that it was there 8 years ago as well. Okay. And the midpoint 4 years ago was there. So the house location,
It was all the 18 Capricorn.
it's
All of
been,
them.
I think it was, well, let me just,
It's very interesting. That is because I've got a good friend who I think is her ascendant, and I've had a few clients who've had some interesting positions myself. So I've seen this 18 reoccurrence, and obviously I told them this is very poignant and potent for you, whether it's their solar return, ascendant, or whatever. For me, 18 degrees of Capricorn is my IC, and so it's absolutely the composite story of my father, who I never actually met in the person, and my mother, who's the only person I ever met who's got blood that I share. And so it's very rich to go into that for me. Like the IC, so I'm thinking about family. Like I'd like to have a home base. I'm excited to manifest and dignify my own longevity in this way, and unpack also some of the unseen, unrecognized parts of the lineage. It's very interesting to have it on the IC for me.
it's
I'd love your opinion on that, and
it,
also I'm interested where it all falls for you.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because it just occurred to me. Um, First of all, it's a double signature for you having it on your IC, because Capricorn speaks to the ancestral voices of the past, just to quote Ariel Gutman, right? That's what she says about the Venus Capricorn star point. One of the themes is ancestral voices from the past. And so here you have that on the IC, which is the parental axis. And so here you are, reflecting and contemplating and embodying and dreaming and thinking and sorting through, aspects of your life journey corresponding to the family you were born into, and working through and planning, what sort of family and life you want to sort of create moving forward from that family kind of space or perspective, right? So it's taking you into very, very, very deep roots and layers of the ancestral history, right, of your whole lineage, whatever that may be. So that actually, for you, Philip, and for anybody else listening who's got the Venus star point hitting off their fourth house, the IC, that's the fourth house in the birth chart. This is a wonderful time, if this interests you, to go through an explorative journey of lineage, because there's so much that you can get out of that kind of journey. There's so much richness and understanding, and also clearing, because Capricorn, it corresponds to the parental axis because it's opposite Cancer, right? So the whole family lineage, blood ancestral lines are huge with this Venus star point in Capricorn. And because she went retrograde with a conjunction to Pluto, it's actually almost saying, here's a chance from a soul perspective to cut some lines, to cut some cords of ancestral stuff that you need to actually clear, in order to be able to proceed forward from an evolutionary perspective, through a journey of truly being able to let go of what you really need to let. We hear those words thrown around so loosely and so often, right? And we have different sort of moments and experiences and journeys, but to me this is a true cathartic journey, shamanic journey, because that's what Venus retrograde is. It's a shamanic journey into the underworld in the axis that corresponds to family ancestral lineage. So I mean, I've done a lot of work through the years with meditation and clearing and cutting cords and this and that and the other. So I'm very into that sort of stuff. And even if you're not into that sort of stuff, even just from a genealogy sort of level of wanting to know about your history, your family, and where they come from, and there could be so much that could be gained from that kind of journey. So here it is 8 years ago, right? 4 years ago, 2018, it was at 18 degrees of Capricorn. And then when you go to 2014, which is 8 years ago, it was 21 degrees of Capricorn. Okay. So that's the retrograde cycle. That's when it began, right? 2014. The halfway point, which is in 2018, 4 years later, is the direct cycle, right? So that's the evening star. So it starts out as the morning star, becomes the evening star halfway through, right? And then 4 years later, which is where we are now, it becomes the morning star again, right?
So this, let me clarify. I like hearing this. I like what you're saying. So basically, in 2018, this, when it's moving direct, that's what we call also a superior conjunction, and I prefer to call interior conjunction is what we're about to experience next week.
Correct.
Cool. I like that.
Correct. Yeah.
We're going within, aren't we? Interior. And so that's very powerful.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, it is. It's great you brought that up.
I love this graph that you've got here. So this is something we can access, or is this something you've created?
No, this is somebody created it for Ariel Gutman. And so if you go to Sophia.com, I think it is. Let me just quickly look it up so that I can give you guys the correct address. It's Sophia Venus.
But each of the different points are a different part of our story, in a sense, as well. Obviously, it's a different area of our sky. And so we can pick them up as a bit like different threads or braids, which are woven through time, which we're sorting out in our process.
100%. What I would recommend, which is what I've done with myself, and I'll do that with clients if they wish to go through that kind of journey. It's sophiavenus.com, right? Just in reference to this table here. That's Ariel Gutman's website. If you go to that, you just hit the Venus Star Point section on her website, and then it takes you into a page where it shows you you can download this link, right? And the link downloads this PDF file, and it's for free, and you can just save it on your desktop, etc. And so what I would recommend is looking at your actual Venus Star Point, right? So let's just say that you were born,
the one before you were born. It's the most recent one.
Yes. I mean, but there's an exception to that rule, because if you were born about 10 days before,
I'm just after Venus retrograde, just after, in Scorpio. Like, it had gone because I know some people who were earlier in my academic year and they've got Venus retrograde, and so I'm like, I've already lived after it. I'm like, I've cleared the way.
Can we do you mind if I have your birthday?
Go for it. 26th of the 12th, 86.
Oh, okay. So yeah, there you are there, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm. So it's 12 degrees. Scorpio is my star point.
Yeah, mine's Scorpio too. We've got the same Venus star point. Okay. So this is very interesting for you, Philip, because of the time you were born, and anybody born around 85, 86, around those years will also have this same sequence. Can you see here the purple lines? Can you see the
oh yes, yeah.
the third column where there are purple blocked sections.
Hmm.
You guys that were born in the mid 80s were born at the turning point of Venus star points. Okay, so in other words, this this is one of the legs in your Venus star point. It's at 29 degrees of, or that might be the arm actually, 29 degrees of Capricorn. Now, see that it says ES there. This is the actual point of ingress of a Venus star point changing. It changed from Aquarius, right, into Capricorn. So you were born just at that turning point, that transition of a 110-year cycle of a star changing over. Not only one but two, because you also have the Leo one 2 lines down that moved out of Cancer into Leo. Okay, that's the beginning of the Capricorn and Leo Venus star points. They actually changed over in 86, 87.
That's
That's
very interesting.
It is, and it's a pretty big deal to be born when two Venus star points are changing over, because that's not necessarily a common pattern. You don't necessarily see two Venus star points transitioning into another Venus star point, aligning so closely together, right? So, so your Venus star points are the Scorpio, right? Then you go above, it's the brand new Capricorn star, and then you've got an Aries Venus star point. Then
Oh,
you've
that's
got,
fun. That's actually my descendant as well, that one.
yeah. What degrees is your ascendant?
14 Libra. So
Wow, that's right on there.
what
Interesting. Interesting.
does
All
that
right.
mean?
Oh, we'll go into that another time. Okay.
I've got an interesting thread that I of consciousness, which is very related to this, is that I discovered when I was having a first look at this type of thing a few months ago,
Yeah.
that actually every 8 years,
Yeah.
whatever day it is, Venus is going to be within a degree of the same degree as it always is that year. So
Yeah.
if we go back 8 years from today, Venus is going to be exactly where it is at 23 degrees Capricorn 8 years ago today. And this happens every single day, no matter if it's retrograde, no matter if it's in the star point phase, it's always going to be 8 years in sequence to the same zodiacal degree, which I found quite astonishing.
Hmm. Yeah. Agreed. Totally. Um, And just to finish up on your Venus star point, so you've got Aries, Capricorn, Scorpio's the main. It's the head of the star. That's the main star point.
So if something happens there, like a new moon at 12 Scorpio, is that going to be particularly poignant for me, considering that's where Venus star point was just before I was born? So it would activate that point. Obviously, it would activate maybe, for instance, something my mother might have experienced when I was in the womb, which I heard echo the ecology of this experience.
Yeah, look, I think new moon cycles, when they hit something off in your chart, whether it's a Venus star point or another planet in your chart, not always, of course, but at certain times in life, big things can happen. For instance, just to use an example, Alec Baldwin, who accidentally shot somebody at a movie set just recently, that whole day, everything that was, and I'm going to do a YouTube video on this because I've just got amazing things to point to that were all activated on that one day when he actually shot his co-star, right, by accident, because the gun was loaded and he didn't know, or whatever it was. But that all kicked off with a new moon and full moon cycle being connected to that particular day, and literally hitting off his sun in Aries, and it was just amazing correlations to what was drawn out from that day. North Node, Jupiter rules churches. It happened in a church. There's just so many things that were triggered that day. But in answer to your question, yes, I would always pay attention to any of my Venus star points and whether they are being activated by, whether it's lunation cycles or transits of any other planet for that matter. It doesn't necessarily mean, though, that every month when the moon passes over your Venus star point, that particular lunation cycle is going to be massive. Obviously, we know that, right? Usually when you have something huge come up, there's a number of different things that are activated. But yes, you could, I think an important and interesting observation would be to, okay, when the moon is in Scorpio and it passes over, or when we have a new moon in Scorpio, will probably be even better, right? There must be something significant that does kind of happen during that time, because we only have that, new moon in Scorpio once a month, right? But
there's going to be a lunar, there's going to be, well, I don't know if it's lunar or solar, but eclipse at 14 degrees of Scorpio or Taurus this year. So that would be interesting to see if it activates, as well as Uranus going opposite that. So we'll study it now.
When is that? Is it a solar or lunar eclipse?
I'm not sure if it's the spring or in the autumn, to be honest. It's a full moon in Taurus, actually. I think it might, so which means it's in the autumn.
Okay.
So
yeah, well, definitely eclipses. Eclipses are massive significators of triggering, massive. So I'll definitely
we shall see.
Too.
So also with this regards to the star point, and you say that it's like being, this is like we're stretched on these points. This is our points of being stretched, isn't it? So that we can gain our expansion.
Yeah, I guess you could use that metaphor. Yeah.
So where does 18 degrees of Capricorn fall for you, if you don't mind me inquiring?
Conjunct my Mars.
Wow, you've got an exalted Mars. I think I'm aware of this. And that's the same degree as where the star point's taking place. It's
very close to it. Yeah, it's been hanging around there for years, that Venus star point, because of how slowly they move, right? And it just occurred to me, though, that when we were looking at for instance, the chart, and we animated to, let me just go to March, I think it was.
Also, it's my Lilith return today, which I didn't know until you got the screen on. I've got 3 degrees of Cancer, which is where it is there, but it's retrograde here in this chart, and I don't have it retrograde. So there you go.
This is the true position of Lilith, and she's always retrograde.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
But I have it opposite my sun. My sun's in 3 degrees Capricorn, Lilith opposite 3 degrees of Cancer.
Okay. Well, I think, a Lilith return, would be something to consider, because it happens, every 8 years, right? So it's not it doesn't happen very often. 8 years is a fairly long sort of chunk out of life, right? So this is bringing up all the raw, visceral, emotional securities, insecurities, all that sort of stuff, right? I won't go any further, but I just wanted to say the Venus star point that's conjunct my Mars is happening when I have a Mars return as well, because I have Mars in Capricorn, you see. So
28 is yours.
No, it's not 28, okay. But I'm just simply showing where Mars is. Yeah, just around about this time. My Mars is 22, actually. Yeah.
So having an exalted Mars, do you feel that this means that your areas of life where you have Aries and you have Scorpio in your natal chart become extra exalted because of the Mars in Capricorn? Do you think this?
I'd have to think about that. It's a good question.
I see a lot of great achievers and sporting heroes. I like watching professional wrestling, and the good ones, they've got Mars in Capricorn.
Yeah. I think Mars in Capricorn, and I'm not saying it because I've got it, but I've just made my observation. I think it's an amazing place to have Mars. It really is. Yeah, it does very well in Capricorn. I mean, it has its shadow side, and just like everything does, but it can accomplish a lot if it really, sets itself to it. It can really accomplish a lot on that earthly sort of level of things. Yeah. So yeah, for everybody who's listening, just, obviously find where 18 degrees of Capricorn is in your chart, track that cycle. And the other thing I was going to say, which I didn't get to finish, was what I would do is, and we started by looking at your example, Philip, which was here. So you identify your Venus star point. You always go to the one before your actual physical birth. If it is only 10 days thereabouts before your birth, then you will go to the one that's there, not the one before your birth. You'll go to the one that's sort of right there at your birth, or just after your birth, as it were, right? There's only a 10-day kind of orb that allows that kind of exception, from my understanding anyway. So typically most people will go to the one before their birthday, and typically it happens to be several months before your birthday, right? That's normal. And so you identify, your 5 Venus star points, and then you just run through this PDF, right? And you just locate, well, okay, so there's my Scorpio Venus star point. When was the next one going to occur? There it is there, 1990, right? So it's 4 years later, of course. As you can see, it's at 8 Scorpio here, right? So it's just a very interesting process to document without looking at anything else. You can then start to add other layers of other things that were going on with transits, whatever. But the amount that you can get just out of following your Venus star points and their movement through your life, and when things were activated at very specific ages, is just a very fascinating thing
And
to
also,
do.
we can check out like our people like in our family, our friends, and even obviously our lovers, and even like our children's, their star points. Like I just noticed that my partner has been, she's got the same one as me. Like she was born in December 1990, and so she's got the 8 degrees of Scorpio one. And so it's very interesting. And you said you've got the Scorpio
Yeah,
one. We
yeah,
got on, we get on pretty well. And
yeah.
so it's interesting to see where there's the correlations in these things.
Yeah, but have a look at this, right? So yours is a morning star and hers
Yes.
is an evening star.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, yeah. So that's an important thing to always kind of monitor. Always pay attention to whether it's morning or evening, because it's going to have a different mode of expression, right?
Oh, yeah.
And
Isn't it
different.
interesting? Like, so what would you suggest that means to have opposing functions, but yet the same point?
Well, I mean, it can be complementary in certain ways, and it can also mean that you both come from a very different position when it comes to expressing your emotionality. And I think that's probably fair to say with your circumstances, right?
Yeah, like it's obviously not one size fits all, but love languages in general, I think it takes a learning rather than just saying, oh, this type of love language fits with that type of love language. Oh, we've got the same love language. So we should be together. I think it is always a learning of how we choose to respond. One of the experiences I've recently been processing has been when at first you get presented with a different modality to operating that might not be the way that you go. And then first you might want to control it, or you might want to change it to be with what's more familiar for you. But if you can give it the space and the acceptance, you go, actually, I like the benefits of this. Although at first I would have been like duff protest. There's benefits to this. This is actually helping me. I can see that this has got maybe some getting used to, but I can recognize that this has got a potential in it, like these different ways of functioning. And so I think that's a good practice to see if we can go with things which are unfamiliar and see if we can find the benefits in them.
100%. And that's life. That's called living. That's called experience, right? But I mean, is there a primary difference between how a morning star person behaves and how an evening star person behaves? Yes. There's a clear distinction between their modality of operation relative to their heart and feelings and values and things like that, and how they express that, share that, and show that. That's a fundamental truth, if you like, right? That's inherently there relative to our own Venus star point. Does that mean that two opposing Venus star points, day one, night one, are not going to get along and it's not going to work? No, it's not saying that at all. It's just simply helping us understand that this is why I am different to you in this way. This is the reason, right? So I mean, there's more to it than that, but I think to have the awareness that, hey, I'm a morning star, so I'm a bit of a go-getter, I'm a bit of a warrior type of goddess or god, I'm very kind of raw and visceral, and intense with what I feel, and I just show it, it's just there, it's in my face, it's in me, it's all over me, it's in my heart, just comes out, right? And then my partner, who's an evening star, they're just like, whoa, 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 chill, just take a back seat, right? Just let me
Like
just let me
it
just
helps me
process.
contain myself.
Well, that's a good word, because evening stars are contained. They are far more contained. And so they need to be given that space to process what you've just kind of, sort of rushed into their sphere, if you like, right? so so that's a very clear, different position of how we are built. And there's no right or wrong. It's just the differences and understanding that about each other in our relationships. And this same principle applies with our family. Your mum might be a morning star, you might be an evening star, etc., etc. It is really worthwhile knowing, what
Funny,
each of them are.
yeah, like my mum, I know she's got Venus in Aquarius, and so that would have been around when she like around, there'd have been the Venus Star Point would have been in Aquarius when she was knocking around, when she still is knocking around, but when she was born, you know, so it would have been in Aquarius back then, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, I was just going to say something about those Venus star points now, and it's just gone.
The opposing types,
Yeah, it was something around that.
or
Yeah,
knowing the benefits and having a different modality of operating, the different.
it's just totally gone, gone, gone,
But
gone.
we've delivered so much information in this. It's been a blockbuster for people to absorb and to study. I've really enjoyed it. If we didn't have any notes or anything planned, we've just gone off the cuff, and it's been really fun.
Yeah, it was totally spontaneous, and I love doing spontaneous things. Oh, that's what I was
No
going to say.
doubt.
That's what I was going to say. Everyone in my family, we're all morning stars, every single one of us.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so see, and this is where, when it comes to family, ancestral dynamics, geology, all that sort of stuff, it's really interesting, because you can do, family astrology, and actually identify very specific themes that run through a particular lineage and family, right? And so, for instance, every single one of us in my family, we all have a personal planet in Aquarius. Some of us have a couple of things in Aquarius, but all of us have Aquarius, and all of us are morning stars. Now, that's not some random occurrence. There are very specific reasons why these themes and patterns are set up, and why each soul chose to be born into that family dynamic that is characterized by morning star quality and energy and signatures, which is basically the warrior goddess getting shit done. And Aquarius, we're all really kind of living our own unique sort of little way of life. We all care about each other, but we all have the ability to be detached and leave each other be. And, I'm just making some simple comments, but this is just something that you can also explore with the Venus star points, even just from the point of view of morning and evening. And there's so much to it, because then when you start to get into relationships with the Venus star points, there's a whole section actually in this book, and like literally, and I've done Ariel Gutman's training. She's got a whole training course on this Venus star point, and that's one of the reasons really I understand it to the extent I do, because I did her training, blah blah blah. But the whole thing in relationships is really complex. It's I feel that the astrology of the Venus star points is, there's so much of it that is still not yet understood. There's still a lot there that is being discovered and transmitted and growing and evolving pretty quickly at the moment, I feel. But Yeah, there's still so much that we need to learn about this, you know, so much. And there's so much there already. You could just study that for the rest of your life and nothing else, and you'd be learning so much. There's just so much there. Yeah, it's we've only just covered some basics today. But it's been great, Philip. Thank you so much for, wanting to share some space and time and chat. It's been really, really great. I hope that your viewers get, something out of this,
Oh, I'm sure they will. It's been a wealth of great content, and I'm really grateful for you being so open and generous with your time and sharing. Obviously, I'll link your YouTube channel if anybody hasn't managed to find it yet, which I'm sure many of my subscribers have, because I know we've done a couple of videos. Then do follow through, because you put great content out very regularly, whether it's every major transit or even a philosophy of something more deep like what we've gone into today. The plethora of great content which you're working with, and I'm sure that people will follow through to that space.
Yeah, thank you. And likewise, I'll be sharing your channel as well, because you've got a particular style, as I have a particular style. And yeah, I mean, this is about Venus. It's about sharing, right? And sharing from a place of authenticity where you don't have fear. You just give and you just let it be. That's the true heart essence of Venus. That's called unconditional love.
I am grateful for that. What a brilliant place to be.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Well,
Well,
thank you so much, and much love and blessings to you and all your viewers and all my viewers, and wishing you all a happy new year, even though the new year starts 21st of March, right? 0 degrees Aries, sun in Aries.
bingo.
But, everyone celebrates, I suppose, in certain ways. So just a nice time to kind of um, chill, I think, and restart. The restart should happen slowly with this Venus in Capricorn, though. Just my advice would be just take your time about the things that you are wanting to really bring up or bring into fruition, or to take action towards for the year of 2022. Don't rush with it, because you need to really go into those 7 layers that Inanna went into when Venus is retrograde. You really need to embody that journey and that experience. Things will come up in your mind, things that you want to do or act on, but don't be impatient. Just wait, because one of the most beautiful gifts of the understanding of Chronos and Saturn and time, which is what rules this Venus star point, is being aligned with the natural cosmic order that corresponds to your soul, and allowing that to unfold and come through at the right time that it needs to. Sometimes that might mean that you need to take the initiative on something, and sometimes it'll mean the opposite to that. But the wisdom is knowing the difference and when to or not to, as it were, right? Final words, that's it. Okay.
Totally appreciated. And it's something which will be continued to be fathomed for the depth of the experience, I'm sure.
Awesome. Okay, much love. Bye. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Cheerio.
Thank you.